Hi everyone, Ann Olson here, and I have a tutorial for you on how to make this baby blanket. It is out of 2 layers of flannel and it will be a quilt as you go method. So here's our little blanket. You're going to get a kit of fabric that's already ready for you. And if you just find our video and you just happen to want to make one yourself, that's fine too. We're using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 strips. They're either 5 or 6 inch wide, and there's 2 of each color. Okay, so you get two strips of each one. So 6 colors. That's a total of 12 strips. And then you'll have your binding strips, which because we're dealing with the flannel, I like to cut it at 3 inches wide just to give it a little bit extra. And there's 5 strips of that for this blanket. So what we're going to do, our first set, to go and piece this in a quilt as you go method, you're going to have your first 2 strips, just lay them out. Then take your next 2 strips, you're going to put right sides together on top with this one, and then we're going to flip it over, and we're going to put the other one. Want them to be nice and smooth. I'm trying to smooth it out. We're going to put the other one right sides together. Right there. And then for the sake of the video, I'm going to put a couple of pins in right here so we can see where we are going to sew. We're going to sew this nice long seam right here. And you could do 1/4 inch, but because the strips may or may not all be exactly the same, I would suggest probably a little bit wider seam, like a 1/2 inch seam. And also because we're going to open it up and then we'll fold it back out so that we can do the next section. So we're going to stop right there and go sew this. Okay, we're sitting here at our sewing machine, and this is just a good helpful tip on tech reminder. If you have not put a new needle in, I would suggest you put a new needle. We're going to be sewing through several layers of the flannel fabric. So a new needle, I'm using an 8012. A 9014 would also work well. You can use a universal or a quilting needle, whichever one's for your machine. So get the ones for your machine. I'm sewing this on my Bernina, so hence I have Bernina needles. The other thing that I'm going to have on my machine is my walking foot, so that I can feed all these many layers. So if you have a walking foot, I would suggest putting that on to help you with feeding all these layers. Because right now we have 4 layers of flannel, but we will also have more later. I'm going to double check where the 1/2 inch mark would be. Okay, so I'm going to use the edge of my foot out here as my fabric guide. So I'm going to end up doing a nice 1/2 inch seam, and I'm okay with that with this project. Okay, so here we go. We're going to go ahead and sew that, and I'm just feeding all 4 layers. Now we've got our first 2 layers are wrong sides together, and then our other 2 layers are right sides together on top of that. Okay, so here we go. I'm just going to go ahead and sew that. Smooth it out if you need to as you go along. Just keep going. All right, and this is just my little scrap that I can sew on. In between, clip that thread. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to unfold, and I'm going to pull and get that, just finger pressing, and I'm pulling on the bottom layer one and this one. So now those two layers are wrong sides together. That polka dot, the blue polka dot, it's wrong sides together. And I'm going to go ahead, go back right back up here, and we're going to sew. And I'm pulling on that so that they stay nice and flat. Okay. So I'm going to get under here, and I think I'll line my edge of this up with right here on my foot. So I don't want to come too far in, but I want to come so that I'm on all, it'll be, let's see, there's 4, and then it's folded over. So there's several layers of fabric that we're going on. And I'm just going to do the quilting seam on top of that. And so I'm pulling these two to make sure that they're not, that underneath one is not folding underneath and tucking. I'm just running and using the edge of my foot as the guide. Run that seam. I'm letting my walking foot do the feeding. I'm not trying to push and hurry or pull on the fabric. I'm just letting that walking foot do it. It's doing the work for me. All right, and there we go. Okay, so here is our strip. It had the seam done and then the top stitching seam done. So we're ready to add our next strip on. So we're going to take that next layer of fabric, and I'm going to put one strip right sides together, right on top of the blue polka dot there. And then flip it over, and my next strip right sides together, right on top of that blue polka dot. So all 4 layers are together there. And this is why I do the 1/2 inch seam, because they kind of don't all line up necessarily, and I'm not trimming it, but I'm doing a 1/2 inch seam so that I make sure I catch all 4 layers in that next sewing as I go. And so then we're going to sew that. We'll put the little pins in just so you can see. Ooh, that pin is a dull pin. It's not very sharp anymore. Okay, so you're going to repeat that. We won't film it for you, but you're going to repeat that for each section that you do. There's 4 more times that we will do that. You'll sew the seam, and then you'll fold it open and top stitch it. Okay? Okay, so here I am. I'm finishing the last of the top stitching. Got all my rows on. And so just the last little bit. Stitch on my scrap. That just keeps my threads held for me for next time I come. Okay, so now we're going to go into the cutting table and we're going to trim that. Okay, so this will make a nice little one. It's maybe a little narrower because I had to trim this one because there was some salvage on it, so I ended up taking off some. So that's okay. So if you come across one that needs some salvage trimmed off, it's okay. Go ahead, go for it. So what I need to do, the sides are fairly straight, which you might want to double check in case you do need to trim a little bit to square those up. The main thing we want to square up is the top and bottom. So I'm just going to put the ruler on there, and I'm going to square it off. So I'm using a line on my ruler there, and I'm going to go ahead and trim and square that off. Clean up that edge there. Okay. Now I'll turn it around and we're going to square the other side. That's the side that's got quite a few sticking out. a little more than the other. So square it up. Okay, and then next up will be binding. So we're going to take our narrow strips and we'll head back to the sewing machine for binding. Okay, so here we are. We've got our binding strips and we need to sew them together. So I'm taking one, I'm going to put the other one across it like this, and then you sew from that point to this point. So let me grab a pin so you can see. So I'm going to sew from there straight across. And if you need to mark it or if you need to pin it, go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to sew directly right across there from that to this one. Okay. Then what I like to do, this, I can't tell which side's which, so I put my thumb on the right side of the fabric and then I run my hand down that, and then I know that that's the right side. Then I'm going to grab the next one and I'm going to put it over the top just like I did before, and I'm going to sew from that point to that point. If you're a pinner, pin. If you don't, don't. Okay, we're going to sew all the way across. Okay, and then my thumb is going on the right side of the fabric. That just helps me know that I've got the right side. And then I'm going to lay this one right sides together. And we're going to sew that diagonal seam again. Okay, I'm going to put my little spider, that's what I happen to call it, in there to catch those threads. Then you're going to take your pair of scissors, or you can go use your rotary cutter if you prefer. You clip the thread and holds them together, and I'm going to trim it about 1/4 of an inch. And I'm just eyeballing when I do it with my scissors. But if you want to, you can go and do your rotary cutter. So I do that on each one, trimming off that excess. Okay, then those are scraps that can become a new spider if I need it. So I'll just set them right under here. All right, now if you are a presser and you enjoy pressing that, go press that seam open. And then you could press your fabric in half. I'm just giving these a little finger press. Real quick. Just because that'll help it lay there when I get there. I like to use the binding method where I don't actually press my binding in half. But if you prefer to press it in half, go ahead and have it pressed in half. I'm just going to fold it right in half to make sure, yep, my seam is going the right way. I'm going to set it on top of the raw edges are all matching. So the raw edge of the binding and the raw edge of the blanket are matching. I'm going to pull this out of the way, set this underneath here, and I need a 1/4 inch seam, so I'm going to use my purple thing. Okay, so it's this line actually right here on my machine. There's a line in the foot. So I'm going to go right there. I'm a little over it, but I think we're okay since we've got 3-inch binding. So you want something you can see where you're lining it up. And I am trying to actually match the fabric with that line. So in my method, I just use my finger to help put those two layers together so that my forefinger is actually riding in between the binding and folding it. My thumb and my forefinger fold it as I go. And so I started, let's go back to how I started because I didn't really explain that. I start by leaving a tail there. So I've got a good 7-8 inches actually left loose, and I just started. Okay, so I'm in the middle of the blanket and just left a tail. And we'll show you how that we fix that tail when we get done. So we're going to go all the way to the corner. And I'm going to stop about a 1/4 inch away from the corner when I get here. Okay, I'm going to put my needle down and I'm going to raise my presser foot. I'm going to turn the project. My needle is still down in there. Put your presser foot back down and then reverse off the fabric. Okay. Then I'm going to pull it out. So I've gone and I've reversed. Okay. Now I'm taking that binding. I'm going to fold it up. And then I'm going to fold it back down. I'm matching the edges here and I'm folding it down. Now I've pulled it about a needle's width down past the edge of the fabric. I found that that helps me to fold that when I go to fold that corner, it really kind of gives a help. Now I'm going to start just right on the edge and I just go ahead and sew it together. So we just come on down that corner and we're going to sew. And there's where my seam is, and so I'm going to go ahead and just finger press that open because it'll lay flatter if I do that. And I'm just going to hold it in place. And sew on down. This really goes pretty quick for binding. So we're going to go all the way around and we'll come back to you here in a second when I'm ready to join the ends of the binding. So go ahead and do all your corners and we'll come back in a second. Okay, so here we are. We've sewn all our binding all the way around. We're going to stop leaving 10 inches loose. And I'm going to sew onto the little scrap. That just keeps my needle from unthreading, so that's why I use that.
We call them spiders.
I do call it a spider because it ends up with lots of thread legs. All right, so here's our strips. Now we're going to grab our little handy short ruler. And you want to cut this, because what I want is I want to kind of put the seam right here in the middle. So I'm going to fold this piece in half and I'm going to cut a straight line right across there. Not very straight, but fairly close. We'll make it a little better. Okay. Then I'm going to line my ruler up with this. And what I'm doing is I'm going to, as wide as my strip is. So in this case, it's 3 inches. Now, if you were doing this on a normal 2.5 inch binding, you would cut 2.5 inches. Instead, you would be doing. So what I'm doing is this strip is flat, laying on your fabric of the blanket. My ruler is right here at the edge of this. I've got the blanket nice and flat, or a quilt if you're doing this on quilt. And then I'm pulling my other strip of binding over here. And I want that to be folded in half. Raw edges are all right there. I'm going to cut right here at the 3 inch mark. So I'm lining that up with my 3 inches right there. And so now when I take these, I'm going to take this one just like this. Move the ruler out of the way. I'm going to grab this one. The bottom corner here of it is going to come to this corner. So I'm pulling it right up to that corner. I'm kind of bunching up the blanket so that I can get that laid on there because you're going to sew that diagonal seam that we did before. Okay, so your corners here match. You're going to sew from that diagonal down to this diagonal. So we're going to move the spider out of the way just by sewing. Otherwise I could pin. And then I'm going to run that right in there. And I'm going to make it flat. And I'm sewing down to the corner on the diagonal. Okay, I'll grab this new little piece here as my spider and clip that spider off. Now, if you pull it, there should not be a twist in it. If there's a twist, unsew. So that just has you double check it before you clip this off. Because if there was a twist, you would want to unsew it before you clip. So I'm going to clip that over there in the trash, and then I'm going to sew this down just like before with that 1/4 inch. And then as I get here, I'm going to open and press that seam so I can just flatten that out, finger pressing, and lay it down. Line up those raw edges, pulling it nice and flat, lining up all my raw edges. And sometimes if you haven't sewn it exactly on the diagonal, one of them might be down a little bit. Like if we look, our raw edges aren't quite all lining up, but I would rather have a nice fold straight line here than worry about the raw edges right there where your seam is. Okay, I'm going to go all the way, back stitch a little bit, and my binding is on for the first step. Now for the second step, I'm going to turn it over, and I'm actually going to top stitch it from the top. So here we are. Let's get my needle up, pull that spider off, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold and pull it right over the top, and I'm going to put it under there. I'm folding this down, and I'm pulling that binding over, and we're going to stitch it down. And so I'm about 1/8 away from the edge with my needle. And just top stitching it down. Okay, and we're going to come to this corner here. I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to show you what I do with the corner. So we're going to fold the bottom one up, and it kind of does this diagonal deal, and folding that down. See how that made a nice diagonal? Let me get my little pointer, and then I can get my finger out of the way so you can see. See, it did the nice mitered corner. So I'm going to hold it right there, and I'm going to stitch to that corner. And use your stylus to hold it in place rather than your finger, or a pin. You could do a pin. And I'd like to go right there. And since this is a baby quilt and going to get lots of frequent washing, I actually like to turn it on the diagonal, and I'm going to stitch on top of that miter. Take a couple stitches there. Just really secures that corner nicely. And then I came out a few stitches, and then I reversed back into that point. And turning it so I can come right back down. And there we go. And we'll show you that corner here in just a second. I'm going to sew a little bit, and then I'll show you what we did with that corner. So I'm just folding in and pulling out as I go. I didn't press this. but I'm just pulling it and folding it over and stitching it down. Okay, and let's take a look at that corner. So here's that corner, and you can see that it's got a few stitches coming out there. See that? And that way it holds that corner nice. And then there's the other side of it, and it's holding it down. And you can see our line on the back, the thread is along here. So I will continue to go all the way around, doing that on each corner, and we'll have the finished blanket. Okay, so here I am, I'm coming to the end. So just coming right there, I'm gonna match up the line of stitches and do a few back stitches, reverse. All right, and we're all done. I'm gonna clip the thread. And then I'm all done. And what I normally will do, just to double check that I actually did catch everything, is I'll stick a pin in this corner. And then I like to just go around and double check that I actually did not miss anywhere. With doing it on top stitching, we shouldn't miss anything, but just in case, because maybe there's a spot that we missed and we need to go back. And by putting that pin in it, then you know, oh, I made it all the way around. So we're all good. If I had missed, I'd just stick it on there, back stitch a little, stitch what you missed, come back stitch a little. So that would do it. All right, and here we go. Here's our finished baby blanket. And it's reversible. So very simple, cute, cute little simple project. Ready to go. And these will be, we're doing them there for Hearts and Hands, and so they'll be donated. And so we'll have a bunch of kits for you ready to go at the next meeting.